walk with me down Peacon Lane. Peacon Lane. This used to be called Grunt Bone Alley. So remember I told you that the waterfront was real close right here before the Navy started doing their land filling like they did. So Grunt Bone Alley, they would take the grunts. Their grunts are plentiful around here. They still are to this day. I can catch them so easy right off pylons on bridges and stuff. And so they would take them. They probably, because it was such an easy catch, they caught so many, and they made a sustaining meal, grunts and grits. That would hold most people over. And nowadays, you'll see like a twist on that. I think it came from these guys back in the day, shrimp and grits. Speaking of food, we are on a food tour. So we had grunts and grits, and now we moved up to shrimp and grits, which I like grunts, but I'd much rather have shrimp and grits for sure. Also, as we're walking down Peacon Lane, I just wanted to point out like this house right here. This is what we call an eyebrow house. The roof is supposed to come over. It's supposed to create a ventilation system and kind of look like two eyes and an eyebrow, which is where the name came from. And it's supposed to be a nice ventilation system. If you open the windows, it's supposed to flow through and be nice. Also, you'll notice some of the roofs are, the ceilings of the porches are blue. And you'll ask why. Some will say it was an old way to keep evil spirits out of your house. And then some will say it was to keep bees and wasps from making their nest on your porch, as it was to look like the sky, so they wouldn't think that it was a porch, so you could build their nest. So pretty smart, huh? I don't know if it works, but it sounds smart. And also, take a look around. You'll notice that most of these are metal roofs. That's a rule in Key West now. And after those fires I was telling you about, that 1886 that took out the customs house that was on Duval originally, they realized, you know, wow, we're a Cuban cigar factory making place now, or everyone has came here from Cuba to make them, so we can't have all this burning down, you know. Let's just think about it. And everything's wood, so they you know, from shingle to shingle, it would have caught real fast. And now that they have the metal roofs, it did more than just be great for keeping fires out. It was also great for, they had a lot of the structures in Key West still to this day have cisterns underneath, so it's a much cleaner way for rainwater to be stored. If it was falling off of shingles or any other many things that were not quite so clean, so they had this water would fall off and fall down underneath and into their cisterns. A lot of structures in Key West still today have cisterns underneath. Some of them they don't use it anymore, but some of them are used for like wine cellars, or like I think there's a city one that's owned, and they have like paperwork they keep down there. So those are definitely still around. Well, Mr. Peacon decided that he didn't want this road that he was on to be called Grunt Bone Alley, so he paid and turned it into Peacon Lane. So now this is Peacon Lane. Well, here I'm going to show you Mr. Richard Peacon's house. Some say he had 8 children, so he made an 8-sided house. It's an octagon house. It was built. He lived in it from 1840s to the 1920s area, and then in 1970 it was bought by a famous architect, and he came in and rebuilt it. And then 1980 is when things changed. Mr. Calvin Klein paid $1 million for this house. It was been said, it was all over the news. It was like the scandal. It was like what made houses so expensive in Key West, and some say it's what made our cost of living go so high and house prices so high. So some also call this the Calvin Klein house. Now we're gonna walk down to this next house here. This was built in 1965, and it was, yes, and it was built by an old shipbuilder. The shipbuilder built everything, like he built his ships out of old wood, and it was supposed to be sustainable to termites and the tropical climate that we have here. So he built that, and then it was purchased. It's called the Freeman Curry House. The Currys were one of the wealthiest billionaires in town. You know, they were one of the wealthiest families in town, and they wanted it to be back up off the street because, as you see here, it has a yard. Not a lot of houses in Key West have a yard, and at that time, they put it on some log rollers. They had some mules, and they had a big banyan tree in the back they used as an anchor, and they kind of rolled the house back. And at that time, it was a thing of luxury to have a yard. So the Currys, of course, the Freeman Curry house had the yard. And then the next house here is the John Bartlam house. John Bartlam owned this house in this property in 1940s. He had a house there, and it got taken away in the 1946 hurricane. So it sat there empty. Him and his family were across in the Bahamas, and 1947 they see this house that is here now, and he said, I want that house. So they put it up on a barge and across the ocean it came here to Key West. And believe it or not, at that time it was actually more affordable and more sustainable and made more sense to take something from the Bahamas than it did from Florida up in the mainland, because it was still just so expensive to get things down from there. All right, let's go have some shrimp at the Eaton Street Seafood Market.